Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Hacks for Working Moms, the podcast that helps you overcome the overwhelm, embrace the chaos, and cultivate a life you love. My name is Megan Strand. Thank you so much for being here today. Today, I am excited, and I'm excited because my guest today is my fabulous producer and resident technical expert, Pete Wright. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Megan. I am so excited because I think I'm actually the first guest to have been on your show twice.
Oh, and it won't be the last time because you are the person I turn to with all of my technical questions.
I live to serve.
That is why I'm excited. So today, Pete and I are going to talk about something about which I have very little knowledge, but I am really eager to learn more about. And I don't even know what to name it. Is it an app?
Yeah, it's a service. It's a web service.
Right, it's a web service. It's called IFT. Rhymes with gift, but really it's an acronym for if this, then that. And apparently it can really help you streamline the things that you do online all day long. Now, one caveat to the show, if you're already an IFT user, this episode is going to cover the basics. If you've never heard of IFT, or like me, you've heard of it and want to know more about it, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Pete, tell us what IFT even is and why we might care about it.
I love IFT. I love IFT because of the intention of it, right? We all have these web services that run for us. They're always running in the back of our sort of internet brain. Whether we're using Evernote, that's a cloud service, or Dropbox, that's a cloud service, and the social platforms. We've got Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. These are all cloud services that operate on the web. But unless you have a really well-intentioned and forward-thinking service, getting all those things to work together can be challenging. It can be challenging to get Twitter to work well with Facebook, to get those things to work well with Instagram. So IFT comes along and they say, here's our idea. We're going to create a back-end, essentially service to help you manage your services. So it allows you to connect all of the services you use in the cloud in ways that you've never really experienced through a very simple little metaphor called recipes. And the recipe ends up telling these web services, if you have this thing over here and you want it to do something over here, then you tell it to do that thing, and you can save that recipe, and it runs kind of invisibly in the cloud behind you.
Okay, so let's give a very basic example just to start out with.
There are three really important terms that we need to know about. The first one is channels. Now, in IFT, a channel is a web service that you use. For example, maybe you use Blogger, or maybe you use Box.net, or maybe you use Dig, or eBay, or Dropbox, or ESPN, or Facebook. I mean, they go on. And in fact, IFT has 181 channels, individual services that you can log into through IFT and activate as part of your account. So that's a channel. A channel is a service that you use and authenticate into IFT. So you sign in with your username and password to that channel, and that becomes available for you to use in recipes. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you only have to do that once. Once you've activated a channel, that's it.
Well, yes, with the caveat being that many of these channels are time limited, and so they will stay authenticated for like a year or 6 months, and then it'll give you a little alert that says, "Hey, this recipe stopped working. You need to re-authenticate." So that's just a security measure. It's not every time. You just need to be aware that does happen.
Okay, so channels.
Channels. So the next one is triggers. This is a really important word because this refers to the if part of the recipe, right? You have a trigger. It's just something that's looking for a condition to be met in one of your channels. For example, you upload a photo on Instagram. So that's an activity. That is a trigger. That might be a trigger. Every time I upload a photo on Instagram, I've described a trigger that involves a channel, Instagram. Make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. The third word that's really important is actions. Actions are the then part of the recipe. You're telling now what you want that service to do based on the trigger for your channel. So now we're building our recipe. If I upload a photo to Instagram, then I want that photo to be saved automatically in a folder in my Dropbox, for example. And so now we've connected Instagram and Dropbox to web-backed services as channels that I've authenticated, and we've built a very simple recipe that lets me automatically and invisibly archive every photo that I upload to Instagram into my Dropbox.
And you don't have to think about it. Once you've set that up, that's it. It's just running in the background.
That's exactly right. And that's really the benefit of IFTTT.
Well, I like that you use that example because one of my little simple recipes that I set up, and I will back up and say, when you set up your IFTTT account, they make it idiot proof. I mean, really, it is the simplest thing ever. You set up your email. They make you select like 3 channels. So you select Facebook and Twitter and Instagram or whatever it is. And then they give you suggestions for starting recipes. It's really, really idiot proof because I did it like 2 days ago. Anyway. But I like to use Instagram because one of my first recipes, I don't use Instagram all that much, but my kids do. So one of my first recipes was, if my daughter posts a photo to Instagram, send me an email.
See, how useful is that?
I know.
It is magical. It lets you be a parental stalker.
Well, I don't want to be a parental stalker, but I do feel like I should know what she's posting, and I really don't feel like hanging out on Instagram.
That is absolutely right. I think that is a great use for IFTTT. A very good personal use that really fits you and what you need to get out of these web services.
And the other cool thing I saw that I'm definitely planning on using, and this is probably more of a personal thing, a lot of this I feel like is useful for a professional, but on a personal level, you can link to Craigslist. So it can send you emails when things pop into Craigslist, or it can, what else can it do? Will it text you? Will it?
Yeah, I mean, you can have it do a number of different things, again, depending on the services that you have. For example, if you use iOS reminders, you can have a service that checks Craigslist and emails something into your reminders list to remind you to check on this Craigslist ad that just popped up. So, you can really have it integrate fairly deeply into your workflow. For me, I'm an OmniFocus user. Now, OmniFocus has an individual email address that I can email things to that will create tasks in my OmniFocus, thanks to the OmniFocus mail drop service, they call it. Well, I can create email recipes that say, every time I see an article show up in one of my blogs that I follow, it will automatically send an email with text that I provide in the recipe into OmniFocus that says, "Hey, check out this post." And I didn't even have to do the searching for it. The service is working in the background to search these things. So you can get really, really advanced in your, in the way you approach to IFTTT. And again, 181 channels. There is a lot to do with this service.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and so let me just ask you a question about that,
Sure.
though, because are you then telling it to pull an RSS feed? Is that what it's pulling off of?
Yeah. In this example, it's RSS, and there are a number of RSS, really simple syndication. If you haven't explored RSS, it's a really useful tool, and so if you have RSS or you're a member of, say, for example, Feedly is one of the free services. It's free. You can sign up and store the websites in there that you visit often. And then you can tell IFTTT to pull your Feedly for specific terms, which is really, really useful. The other one is that I use a read later service. Are you familiar with any read later services? You tried to get me on one of those a while back, and I just could never pick it up. So no, I do use Feedly, but not read later. This is on me then. I did not.
I'm not saying it's on you.
I did not poke you enough about this one.
I am not saying it's on you. What is the one that you use that you like?
Well, I use Instapaper and Pocket. Both of these are read later services, and it's wonderful because I can set up, for example, Instapaper allows me to take a website that I've been reading. Say I come across an article on a website that I use. It's very long, it's one of those long format articles features.
I hate long articles. Jeez, just can't you tweet about it?
I hate the reading.
I'm just kidding. I love reading.
This is my trick. I love Instapaper. When you become an Instapaper, remember you have a little button on your browser bar that says send to Instapaper, and so with one click, you are now sending large format articles. Strips out all of the formatting and design, and just gives you the text, right? Mm-hmm. Which is useful in itself. But then you have to actually go back and read it.
Well, therein lies the problem.
That then becomes a problem. Now, I have kind of a workflow where I go in and I actually, I read my Instagram every now, or my Instapaper every now and again, and it's kind of my weekend reading. But if there's something I really like, I want to save it and archive it in a place that I can use then for research. We've talked about Evernote. Evernote is my everything bucket.
Absolutely.
So I have an Instapaper action that says every article that I heart, that I like in Instapaper, I want you to archive that in Evernote so I never lose it, and it is always in my research directory, in my sort of digital filing cabinet.
That's smart. And I'm glad you brought up research, because as I was kind of thinking through recipes, because there really is some thinking involved, like, how could I best use this? What struck me was that this would be great for research, because you can do search terms on Twitter, for example. So I could, if I was researching, I don't know, kids and money or something like that, I could do search term in Twitter and then have it drop into my Evernote file on research for the show.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I could see this being a really useful research tool that's kind of doing research for you in the background. Maybe it's from an RSS feed. Maybe it's from Twitter. Maybe it's from Facebook. I don't know what. And sending it to you how you want it. You can do it in emails. And then I think you can also do like digests, right? So it'll either send to you when it finds it, or it sends it to you at the end of the week or at the end of the day.
Right, exactly.
So you're kind of packaging it how you want it, which is really super cool. It's like having a little research assistant.
It is just like that. And here's where you start taking it into sort of black belt territory, right? When you set up, for example, a document in Google Docs that is shared between multiple people. Say you're working on a project, and that Google Doc then takes all of the services that you have tied to it, whether it's Twitter search terms, whether it's RSS feeds, whether it's Evernote notes or Instapaper or Pocket. You can have all of these things. Now, as certain actions are triggered, the action that takes place is it sends those resources to a shared Google Doc that you're using to build your research sources. So, for example, I use it quite often to build my podcast rundowns. You know, when we have people who, we're all sharing links and resources that we want to talk about on a given show that I'm doing, we'll build these rundowns using IFTTT to automatically give us the latest headlines from the latest sources that we've established, and it builds it in a single unified Google Doc that allows us to work together on it and define what we actually want to talk about. It makes the act of doing research super easy. Now, you said it. There is thinking involved. Eventually, you have to. The human has to come in and actually, we don't just talk about everything that if. Sometimes it's dumb. Sometimes
I was just going to ask that. So like, are there times that you're like, oh, what the heck is that?
Yeah, why did it bring in that again? Or you get this. You run into this problem with the Huffington Post too, because they repost from other sites, and so you end up with multiple. You know what?
There's a lot of sites that do that. I was honestly thinking about that this morning too. Like, where did this article originate? Because I've seen it 3 times now.
That's right. So
that's a whole other show.
Frustrating. Yeah, it is. But just the act of taking particularly linked posts in Twitter, linked tweets. You can have linked tweets archive into a doc. It is a great way to build sort of a research directory. Now, IFTTT has another sort of side to it. They've released an app for Android and iOS called Do.
Yes, Do.
Do is an extension of the IFTTT recipes system, right? So what Do allows you to do is it creates essentially a button, like a one-time action.
Like the Staples button.
It's the easy button. One of the things that we haven't talked about is home automation, and IFTTT does some really incredible home automation tricks, because it's connected to Wemo and Honeywell and all of the big, Open Nest in particular is a big one.
So those are all things like heat and light and alarms and webcams and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Right? I have none of those. Do you have any of those?
I don't have any of these, but
it kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, a little bit it does, but Do actually, when you think about Do, it makes home automation ends up being a really interesting kind of tool all of a sudden, because it creates a one function app on your phone where when you launch it, it just has a button and it says, do this thing now, right? But because it's connected to the web, let's say you have been on vacation and it's cold outside and you come in from the airport and you're at the airport, but the temperature in your house, which is say 40 minutes away, it's really cold. And so what you want is your Nest connected thermostat to go up to, 68 or 72 degrees before you get home. So you open your Do app and you have a recipe that says, Do set my temperature at home to 72 degrees. And you push the big button and that's all it does. It goes to your house and it sets your temperature for you.
That's so cool.
Those are the kinds of things you can do with Do. But again, any channel that is set up in your IFTTT account is available for do. So you can do all sorts of wonderful things. You can add a to-do to your checklist in Evernote. You can track your work hours in a Google Doc. You can quickly update your Facebook status on a Facebook group, without launching the Facebook app. It's like a one button. Push this button, type a few words, and you're there. So, but you can get even more advanced from that. You can say, I want to mark off the next hour as do not disturb on my Google Calendar. I want people not to be able to schedule things with me at that time, right? So it can be really, really useful.
And that's still a do, right?
That's a do. It's a one-click do.
Talk a little bit about the phone number that you get with IFT and what that can do.
You can. Because you brought up phone, I have to mention one more do, which is a great recipe that has 2.6 thousand people who have downloaded it and 178 likes, which is get out of a meeting by sending yourself a phone call. So
no way.
You launch the Do app, and the IFT channel will call your phone so you can say, oh, hey, I got to get this, excuse me, and get out of a meeting. Right. One button, excuse yourself from a meeting. That is way too popular in the top charts on recipes.
Hilarious. Well, so just to clarify the difference between IFT and Do, because I downloaded the IFT app on my phone.
Yes,
and
two different apps.
So it's separate.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to do it separately.
Yes, and so, but you can manage your do's in the IFT website. So, there's a little section in there where you can look at your recipes and your do's. But you do bring up this channel, the phone channel, which I think is really, really useful. It's what they call a native IFT channel. So it's run by IFT, and it allows you this set of triggers and actions built around calls. And you are assigned, when you activate this channel, an IFT phone number. So I can, for example, call my IFT phone number, which is a San Francisco local number, and I can create events from a voicemail that I leave on my IFT voicemail box. I can say something quickly like, record a podcast with Megan tomorrow at 10. And lo and behold, check my Google Calendar, and all of a sudden I have an appointment with you to record a podcast tomorrow at 10.
That's so cool.
Yes. And so you can do all sorts of great things. You can record voicemails for yourself and save them in Dropbox. You can schedule alarms. You can send yourself emails. I mean, there are all kinds of really useful tips as soon as you activate that phone channel.
One of the things that I've been wanting to try to accomplish is sending yourself an email in the future. We'll do that.
Send yourself an email. Well, like
if I don't know how I would do it. Like if I had I'm trying to figure out what the trigger would be. Say I set a goal for myself. I'm just going to use a generic example, and then I want to email myself once a quarter to be like, hey, how's that goal coming? How would you do that?
That is.
I've wanted this a lot.
Yeah, and that I have to tell you, I've never run into that in the context of IFT. There is that great service that they did. There was a Reply All episode of the podcast, great podcast on sort of the cultural implications of technology, and they did this wonderful episode on a service about which I cannot remember the name, but it's defunct now.
I know what you're going to say. Is it?
Yeah, because the guy, it was a wonderfully creative technologist.
Something box.
Yeah, it was like the insult box or something, where it would send you emails that would really dig into your biggest sources of shame in your life. Yeah, your insecurities. So you tell the service up front what your insecurities are, and it would remind you of them.
Anxiety box.
Anxiety box. That's right. I'm pretty sure it's not functioning right
sad.
now. But
because he's not anxious anymore.
He's not. He solved his goals. But that was a great service. That just reminds me of things that you do with yourself in the future. There are third party services that, and I think there's still a plugin for Gmail that you can actually add in there to schedule your schedule emails to be sent in the future. I don't use any of them, so I'm afraid I am not a resource for that.
You're not the resource for that. That's right.
This
is like what IFT is. It's like you got to kind of think through like, oh, what can I do with that? And there are so many. It's like limitless possibilities.
I do like this channel. Once you activate the phone channel, you can, you're driving down the road and you have your headset in because you're driving extremely safely and hands-free. and you want to leave a note to yourself, right? You push the little button and you say, hey, call IFT. and suddenly you're leaving yourself a voicemail that will get emailed to you as an MP3 attachment. It doesn't get transcribed, so you don't have to worry about that, any transcription errors. You just listen to your voice that you left for yourself earlier.
Do you do that all the time? Do you have like thousands of voicemails from yourself as you're driving down the road?
I have them sent to my OmniFocus mail drop. So they actually remind me. They don't hit my inbox, my email inbox. They hit my OmniFocus.
Very cool.
Very cool, because then I can, when I'm doing my daily review, I just review my inbox and schedule them and disregard the things that don't matter to me.
That's so awesome. One thing I noticed, though, Pinterest is not a channel.
What do you think that's all about?
I don't know. I think it's a conspiracy. But somebody was saying something about an RSS feed on Pinterest. So I think you would be pulling stuff from Pinterest versus like uploading
to Pinterest.
To Pinterest, right? Was what I was thinking. Oh, that would be cool if I could. Oh, yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, no, in some services, I mean, even as we have 181 channels, some services really are kind of gated communities, and they want you to be using their interface, and there are reasons behind that. In some cases, really, really good reasons. And in some cases, it's just frustrating.
Excellent. All right. Well, this has been so fascinating, but you wanted to talk about workflow, and I want to hear about workflow.
Okay.
Because it's another productivity hack. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about being productive.
Absolutely. So workflow is an app that I picked up. This is one of those apps that is both wide and deep. And so I find it in some cases hard to even talk about, because I know that even I am scratching the surface. But when you think about what we are talking about in terms of IFT on the show right now, workflow allows you to do that on iOS, so on your phone and on your iPad. So here you are, you go into workflow, which you download from the iOS App Store. And you have these recipes that they don't call them recipes in this case; they call them workflows. And you can go into the gallery and look at these assorted workflows and see if any kind of make sense to you. Now, I have one that I think provides the best example for when a workflow really, really works, and it is called the Home ETA workflow. This workflow is saved out as an app on my phone, and when I tap it, it automatically starts. It seeks out my location based on where I am from the GPS on my phone. It then takes that location and it maps my current location to home, to where my home address is. It then gives me the driving time, the distance. It plugs that distance into a new text message that says, in my case, it says something kind of cheeky that I won't share on the show, but it's targeted to my wife, and it says, hi, insert wife's name here. I am currently at, insert the current address, and I will be home in insert number of minutes.
Wow.
And then it sends that text.
That could save a lot of marriages.
It saves a ton of time. I can't talk about the marriage part, but it saves a ton of time when I don't even know where I am. I don't know where it's going to. It's just a number of taps that I don't have to do. I have set up a separate one of these for my daughter's phone too, so that she knows I can send her a quick text and say, hi, honey, I'm currently here and I'm going to be there in just a few minutes. And she always writes back the same thing. Nice robot text, Dad. You can do even more things with that.
That's awesome, though.
I want to give you a great example here, because it also ties into your calendar and your OmniFocus and your location. So, for example, you're out with a friend and you say, hey, gosh, we should stop and get a cup of coffee. I don't know what coffee shops are around here.
That never happens.
I have a walk to I have a walk to coffee shop workflow here. This takes my current location, looks on the Google Maps directory. Actually, I'm not sure if it's Google Maps. It may be the Apple Maps. Anyway, so it looks through the business directory, and it tells me gives me options. Here are all the coffee shops that are in your 1.5 kilometer radius, right? So walking distance. Which one do you want? You push which one you want. Joe's Small Coffee Shop, independent business that you love to support. You hit Joe's, and it gives you walking directions to this coffee shop.
That's so cool.
Well, in this case, 2 taps. I have a where's next workflow. So now I tap that, and it looks at my calendar. It looks at the time, and it says, hey, your next meeting on your calendar is in 30 minutes, and here are directions to that to that location based on the location.
Love that
so
too.
you get an idea of the kinds of things you can start doing once you string services together. And most of these are straight out of the workflow gallery. It can be intimidating when you open it up and you start looking at the options that you can tweak on this thing. But I'm telling you, you don't even have to do any tweaking at all. You can take things right out of the gallery and make them work for you immediately. Great, great, great iOS hack.
I love it. This is so awesome. Thank you so much, Pete, for being here and sharing your technology wisdom with us, my listeners.
Always, always welcome, Megan. I love it.
Good. Well, I originally introduced you as a producer of my show and resident technical expert, but you do have lots of great outposts online. So where would you like people to find you if they'd like to hear more about the fabulous Pete Wright?
Well, if Twitter is probably the best way. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them on Twitter. But you can see the other shows that I do, both produce and host, over at rashpixel.fm.
Excellent. And I will put those in the show notes along with some great links that we talked about today. And on behalf of Pete and myself, we'd like to thank you for joining us for Life Hacks for Working Moms. You can find the podcast on iTunes. We do recommend you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can also find show notes for today's show at LH4WM.com. You can find me on Twitter at Megan Strand. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll talk to you next time.